an incredible period of time right now. Right now, as we stand here today, if we go back a few thousand years, something was going on. Rabbi Dessler famously said, or the Rabbi Nesiva Shalom famously said, that history, Jewish moments aren't mere things that we watch. We relive, we re-experience things. And what has happened to us today, and during this period, today, and during this period of time, is that right now we are on the path to destruction. The proverbial car, is heading off the cliff. Because as we stand here today, a few thousand years ago, we stood, some of us may have been the people in Israel, but for the most part, most of Israel, if we were alive then, would be standing in a desert, waiting for the reports of the spies. Right now, as we speak, the spies are somewhere in Israel, about to come back with their report of whether or not we charge to achieve the ultimate goal and to reclaim our homeland, or whether we pull back. So right now we're living through the spies. We're living through their reports. And as you know, we're in this process. And just in a week, we'll have Shivas Har B'Tammuz, which is the beginning of the 3 weeks. And then all of a sudden, I hope not this year, but potentially we have to prepare ourselves for Tisha B'Av. And Tisha B'Av is the root of all destruction, all the sorrow. Tisha B'Av is the reason why we're so separate from each other right now. Why we got to do this on Zoom and not live. Why Israel shut their borders right now. Why we don't live in a place and at a time of peace and security. All of the destruction that we experience as a Jewish people stems from that one day of when the spies came back, delivered a report, and the Jews sat back and cried. The tears that they had that night are the tears that we still have every single year since. What I want to do with you today, just for a few minutes, is I want to explore what went wrong. Like, what went wrong? They had a job. They were spies. Can you imagine? Like, Israel sends in spies to Iran, and they come back to like, oh, by the way, we got some bad news. There's a nuclear reactor. And the general's like, really? A nuclear reactor? Wonderful. You know, the two of you for saying nuclear reactor, two of you are going to be punished forever. Like, what were they supposed to say? There weren't big cities? Like, were they supposed to lie? Were they supposed to come back to Moshe and be like, by the way, things are amazing. They're already building condos in Yerushalayim. You can go to Har Nof if you want. Rampe Shemesh almost built up. The Mamila Mall looks awesome, and I had a cafe afuch, and it's amazing. Were they supposed to do that? Or are they not supposed to come back and be like, by the way, it's going to be terrible. We're going to get rocked. They delivered the report that they were asked to deliver. They editorialized a little bit. Okay, they're Jews. How many Jews do you know that deliver reports with just facts? Have you ever been in a conversation with a Jew and he's like, this is the facts? This is what we do for a living. We editorialize. We throw a little drama in. It's a spice of Jewish life. For this, we just served an egel a couple of weeks earlier. We just finished getting over idol worship at the foot of Mount Sinai. That we sort of got over. This, a true report with a little bit of emotion, that's destruction forever. How could that be? So I want to go into the report with you and share that what they delivered wasn't the point. There was something much deeper going on. And what's going on, what went on then during the times of the spies, in my opinion, is actually going on every single year since. Because Geula is not just a communal thing. It's not just what we all get together. Geula is also personal. That's why if you look at the bracha, the blessing in the Shmona Esrei, in the Amidah, in the prayer that we say 3 times a day, where we put that blessing of Geula is really in the personal section. Because Geula takes place personally for our families, for our communities, and for our nation. So what went wrong? So let's go into it together. Let's jump in to the spies. When the spies come out, they use very specific reasons for why they think we're going to fail. And there were two major reasons that stood out. The first one was where people were living. Back then, most of antiquity lived behind walls. The world wasn't filled with peace. Even now, as we talk about the craziness of the world, we're living at a time that is exponentially greater than it was back in the old days, where some force can show up, knock on the door, and destroy everybody. So they live behind these fortified cities with gates and walls so that they can protect themselves from neighboring kings coming to attack them. So when the Jews walked into Israel and they went around, they looked up and they saw these massive walled cities. Now, there was no F-16s back then. There were no drones. They were fighting with rocks, scissors, and papers. I don't know. They're fighting with swords. When you go up against the wall and you've got a sword, I don't care how much you sharpen that thing, you got no chance. And these Jews are looking up and going, that's a pretty big wall. They're sitting on top throwing things down. We have no shot. And they're looking around at all these cities that are fortified cities, and they're going, fortified cities? How are we going to beat fortified cities? The second major bit of information that they have is that everywhere they went, somebody was dying. The Medrash teaches us that when they went to a community, there was a commotion. They said, what's everyone doing? And they go, well, the really important person, the mayor of the town, the head priest, the woman who took care, died. And we're all going to a funeral. They're like, whoa, okay. Next town, where's everyone going? Oh, that person died. They're like, oh, okay. Next person, okay. Before you know it, everywhere they go, somebody's dying. And they come back and they deliver bits of information. And two of these bits of information form their view of how that we have no chance. We're going to go up against these giants. They're standing behind fortified cities, they say. We're going up against people that have walls. But more importantly, they say, Eretz Ocheles Yoshveh. This is a land that eats its inhabitants. It devours people. Everywhere we go, everyone's dying. Why would we go there? And these two bits of information form, amongst other things, their position. And they lead the crowd in tears and in basically defeat. So what went wrong? There were fortified cities. And there are funerals everywhere. So I want to share with you a story. I don't know if it's true, but it's informative. When we understand this piece, we'll be able to understand exactly what went wrong. I read this one. I don't know if this ever happened or not, but it doesn't matter. I read a story once about a woman who was flying from New York to the Midwest of America. New York is known of being a little bit of a rough place. I'm from New York. Some of our airports are tougher than others. So she goes to the store as she comes in. She walks into the airport. She's a little early. And she walks into the store. And she buys a magazine to read, maybe a book. And she sees, it catches her eyes, a bag of cookies. And she goes, you know what? Let me treat myself. I got an hour before the plane takes off. I got this great book I can read. Why not? She buys the bag of cookies. She goes to sit by her gate. She sits down at the gate. She opens up her book and she starts to eat her cookies. And she puts her hands in her cookies. Now she puts the hand in her cookies to take a bite. She looks over, and right across there's the chair where she has her stuff. Right next to that is a man. And the man puts his hand in the bag and takes a cookie. And she's like, what? He just put his hands in my cookie bag? Like, where am I? What is going on here? So she takes a cookie. She pretends like she doesn't see. Maybe he just, I don't know, wanted a cookie. She takes cookie, then he takes cookie. She's like, what is it with these New Yorkers? I mean, this is a jungle out here. What kind of manners? So she takes another cookie. You know what he does? He takes another cookie. And she's like, are you out of your mind? And she doesn't want to say anything. She doesn't know if the guy's dangerous. Like, what kind of human being just walks up to a stranger and takes their cookies? So she takes a cookie, then he takes a cookie, then she takes a cookie, and now it's like a cold cookie war. And she's taking and he's taking, and as he's taking cookies, he's just smiling the whole time, like giving her like a smirk. And as he gives her a smirk, she's getting angrier and angrier and angrier. And she takes it and he takes it and she takes it. And before you know it, there's one cookie left, and she looks at it and he looks at it. And all of a sudden, before she could put her hand in, he puts his hand in the bag first. He pulls out the last cookie. Can you imagine? And he breaks it in half and he smiles and goes, here. And she just, that was the straw that broke the camel's back. She grabs the cookie and goes, the nerve of some people. Brutes, how could you? And she storms up and she walks to her gate and she just can barely contain herself. What kind of chutzpah? Some random stranger eats her cookies and then has the chutzpah to break it off as if like he's doing her the favor. And she waits online. And finally, her gate is called, her boarding gate and her zone. And she gets on that plane and she can't even compose herself. She's got fear and anger and frustration and disgust all going through her head. And she sits down at her chair. And as she sits down, the guy boards. And as the guy boards, he's like, hi. And like, she's like, what? And she gives him like a look, like, really? And he sits down in, a bunch of rows behind her. And she's like, deep breathing. And as she finishes deep breathing, she comes to and she goes, you know what? I got to calm myself down. So she reaches into her bag to get her book to finish reading. And as she reaches into her bag, she pulls out, you know where this is going? Her bag of cookies. For those that didn't get it, she was eating from his bag of cookies the whole time. Her bag was still in her bag. Now let me ask you a question. That woman, before she reaches into her bag to realize that her bag of cookies was there, and as opposed to this guy being a guy who was disgusting, taking her cookies, she was actually mistakenly taking his cookies. And he was being great about it. Before she realized that, as she turns down the rows and sees him, what she's seeing, the emotion that she feels, is disgust, is anger. How could you just eat my cookies? Just randomly take it from somebody else? But something strange happened. The minute she touches it and realizes that it's her bag of cookies in her bag, and he was actually giving it from his bag of cookies, she turns around, her same eyes now look at the same guy, but totally differently. Same woman, same man. What changed? What changed? For the first time, before she reached into her bag, when she looked at him, she was filled with anger. And the next time she reached into her bag, she was filled with embarrassment. She was filled with pride that he was such a good guy about it. You know what changed? She didn't. She's still her. He's still him. The cookies are still eaten. You know what changed? Her perspective. We walk around in our lives and we think that the reason why we feel the way we feel is because what we're all experiencing is reality. And what we think we're doing is gauging an actual perspective of reality. I know reality. This is supposed to be like this and like this and like this. And the way we feel and the way we find strength, the things that make us angry or upset, optimistic or pessimistic, we think are based on what's happening outside. But that's not true. Our emotions are not based on reality. Our emotions are based on our perspective of reality. None of us have ever actually experienced reality. What we experience is a perspective, because what we have in our minds is this thing called a schema, which what it does is it basically takes out most of reality. We can't take in all of reality. We can't know everything out there. So when me and you look out into the world, the feelings that we have, the feelings of I can or I can't, isn't based on whether I know if I can or I can't. It's based on my perspective. It's based on how I interpret things. It's based on my beliefs of the way something should be. What should my wife say? What should my husband know? How should my kids react? How should the world work? What should come my way? We look at the world and we make beliefs and judgments on the things around us. And the facts may be right and the facts may be wrong. But the most important thing is those judgments form our beliefs. And when we look out into the world, it is our perspective that makes us feel a certain way, not the reality. And one of the greatest mistakes in life is that we think that if the world will change, then I'll feel good. You know why I don't feel better? You know why I don't feel stronger? You know why I don't feel like I can? Because of this. When she will, and when he will, and when they will, once it works out on the outside, then I'll feel that way. And we never get that really the reason why we don't feel in the level of empowerment that we should, it's not based on the circumstances. It's based on our perspective of the circumstances. It's this that we have to work on, not the world. Now watch how this works. When Moshe Rabbeinu, when Moses tells the Jews to go into Israel, he gives them instructions. Why in the world are the Jews looking for fortified cities? What do they know what to look for? They just came out of Egypt. They're slaves. They know about war. They took a course from the Mossad on how to canvass an area for battle. What do they know? A minute ago, they were like running around as slaves. Then they sat back and watched the greatest show on earth. Now they're living in a desert, basically having man from heaven, clouds of glory with the air conditioning up perfectly around 68 degrees. They're living happy and pretty. You think they're going to walk in and know how to look? You know what happened? Moses told them, look out for something. And tell me about it, he says. They didn't just pick randomly. They were reporting back. Why would Moses have them look for fortified cities? Doesn't he know when they see fortified cities, they're going to realize that they can't do it? He wants them to come back with a bad report? So watch what happens. I'm going to read from the actual verse in Hebrew and I'll translate. He says to them, Ura'isem, and look, Esa'aretz, go look at the land. Mahi, what is it? The Im Ha'am, and if the nation that lives there, Yoshev Aleh, that rests in that land, Hachazak, are they strong? Who? Harafe, or are they weak? What does that mean? How would they know if they're strong or they're weak? Rashi, the great commentator, says, you know what he gave him the sign for? Simon, he gave him the sign. Im Bifsarim, if they're living in valleys, open cities, Chazakim hem, they're strong. Kesomchim al gevurasam. You know what he said to them? Go look if they're fortified enough, because if they're sitting in outer valleys, they must be strong guys. If you walk down the block and you see a bunch of guys in a corner, you think those guys are mentally strong or weak? If you're hanging out in a corner in the middle of the night, you probably feel like you're strong. If you go a little further and you're behind a wall, you probably feel less strong. Maybe it's the right thing to do, but if you're trying to gauge who is ready to fight, who has that war mentality, usually it's people sitting in open cities. The imbe arim, but if they're sitting in these fortified cities, Moshe says, you think I'm worried about walls? I'm not worried about walls, I'm worried about people. We'll take care of the wall. We'll figure it out. I don't know how we'll get it. We'll get in. I want to know that if we're going hand-to-hand combat, are the people we're going up against, are they strong-minded? Are they warriors? Or are they standing behind walls? Moshe's sign for whether or not they're strong or weak is fortified cities. For the spies, fortified cities means we're going to lose. For Moshe, fortified cities means we're going to win. They're both looking at the same fact. But you know what's different? Their perspective. Because it's not about the objective truth. It's about your perspective. To the spies, they see the wall and go, we're dead. To Moshe, sees the wall and goes, we're going to win. Let's go one step further. Why was everybody dying for? What are they dying for? Does the land not devour its inhabitants? So the Medrash says, you know what God was doing? Back then, I mean, even now, but back then, like, they didn't really travel much. Like, there were no airplanes. Even travel was very difficult back then. So most people lived and breathed and stayed in the same city. So if you're sitting in a city every day of your life and 12 guys walk in, you're like, what are you guys doing here? We're just passing by. And then the next city and the next city and the next city. At some point, people will be like, yo, what are you guys doing here? Like, are you spying the land? That's dangerous. So you know what God does? God created an event. You know what an event could be? Funerals. Because you know what happens when someone dies? People come in from different cities. When an important person passes away, you have guests. Anyways, they're preoccupied. So when 12 guys show up to a city, if everybody's worried about the funeral, no one's paying attention to them. To the spies, the funerals were signs of death. God gave it to them in order to keep them alive. One fact, two perspectives. You know what the story of Tisha B'Av is? You know what the stories of the spies is? That life is about your perspective. And if you want to know the pathway to true Geula, it is not about fixing your wife or your husband or your kids or your community. It's about fixing our perspective. Because you can bring everything to somebody, but if they don't have a good perspective, they got nothing. And you can bring nothing to somebody, and if they have a good perspective, they have everything. Wealth is not based on a bank account. Wealth is based on perspective. Hasameach bechelko. Strength, relationships, community, the foundation of our lives is when our perspective is clear. So what was their perspective and how do we change ours? So there's a little clue. And the clue that takes place, actually there's two clues. I don't have that much time left. Just give me 5 more minutes. Watch this. In Devarim, Moses recounts all the story of the Meraglim. The great part about Devarim, if you ever want to understand Torah, go to Devarim, because Devarim is Moses' interpretation. So he gives you his perspective, so you're seeing it from a different, the story that took place in Bamidbar is the events. The story that took place in Devarim is the color commentary. Watch what he says to them. He's telling the Jews about the story of the spies. Remember, the story of Devarim doesn't take place in actual time. It takes place 40 years later. So Moses is telling the story to the kids 40 years or 38 years after this happened. And here's what he says. V'targinenu be'oaleim. You grumbled in your tent. V'tomru, and they said, or you said, B'sinas Hashem hotzianu mi'eretz Mitzrayim. You know what the problem was, Moses says? It wasn't that we were going to lose. It was that the Jews said to themselves that, you know why we're doing this? Because God hates us. You know what the Jews thought? That God hates them. They're nobodies. They're nothing. God's not taking care of us. This is some game he's playing. And he brought us to the banks to have us killed off. When they walked in, Moses is telling them the perspective that they had was God's killing us. And as soon as they had that perspective, as soon as they thought that God wasn't behind them, as soon as they thought that God didn't love them, as soon as they thought that the challenges that are coming in front of them are signs that God has lost favor, as soon as they looked at the challenges of their lives and concluded that if I am facing a challenge, it must mean that God is mad at me, upset with me, doesn't know me, doesn't love me, whatever it is. As soon as they had that defeatist Jewish guilt mentality, those glasses saw at challenge, and all the glasses saw was, I knew we'd lose. There's fortified cities. I knew he would devour us. Everybody's dying. I knew he would kill us. They're giants. They brought back these fruits that were massive. You see, the sin of the spies was that they used the wrong perspective. And that's why the spies say to the Jewish people at the end, V'tihi be'einenu kechagavim, we were in our eyes like grasshoppers. V'chein hayu be'eineihem, and then that's why we were in theirs. Listen to these words. We were in our eyes like grasshoppers, and so we must have been in theirs. They didn't hear them speaking. They didn't read their blogs. They didn't tap into their phone lines. They just expressed how they were feeling. We feel like I can't, so that I must not be able to. This defeatism is the core of our destruction. That's why families can't get together, because I can't. That's why we can't overcome massive challenge, because it's hard. It's too much. He doesn't love us. God's bringing us into this world right now and saying, you are my people. This is the fourth quarter of Jewish history. Get together, figure it out, be bigger, be stronger, try, whatever's in front of you. And the root of destruction is, I can't. I don't know. I didn't try it, but I can't. And the root of redemption is when a Jew says, why not? Why can't we? As Kalev said, Olo nalev in Irush, let's try. So in a community, that's what I love so much about your community, is when I looked out at all those people, I said to myself, if there's ever a community that all stands together in one day, look at this community. Look at what they stand for. Look at what they can pull off. You know who you are to the world? Do you know what you stand for the larger Jewish people? This is our job. This is why we're here. This is the fight that we're going through right now. We can't reach redemption if our brains aren't looking for it. If our minds aren't geared in being strong and overcoming challenge and reaching out to the person across the street. If our spirituality was what our spirituality was 5 years earlier because we just conditioned ourselves and we're not waking up in the morning and saying, how do I get stronger? How do I get closer? How do I learn more? If we're having the same fights, this is all not us. It's that mentality that was brought to the forefront by those spies that is keeping us where we are. This is the root of destruction. How do we get out of it? Well, this I'll end. There's two words. These are the two words in Hebrew, one word in English. It sounds like it's not related. But if you practice this every day, you will see it's related. The number one way to get out of any negative mentality, in Hebrew it's called hakarat hatov. In English it's called gratitude. There's a concept in life called thank you Hashem. We thank Hashem for things, and we think gratitude is what you do when someone gives you a good thing. That is gratitude. It's just level one gratitude. That's called being a mensch. When someone gives you a gift, if you don't say thank you, that's not really, you don't get a sticker for that, you know? That's called being a human being. Like your mom would be like, say thank you, right? We're proud of ourselves. Like God gives us breath and we say like a blessing, or like, I did great today. Like God gave me breath and I said, thank you. Okay. Like that's good. Wonderful. What does gratitude really mean? So there's an expression that we use in Judaism called gam zu l'tova. We mistake it. We think gam zu l'tova means, okay, I'll get him next time. Like this didn't work out, but I'll get it next time. You know what it really means? Gam zu l'tova means this thing that I'm looking at, this thing is also good. You want to know what it really means to change your perspective? the challenge of the perspective of a Jew, what it really means at its core, in my opinion, is you look at your challenges and you say, this too is good. I don't have to know why right now. I don't have to figure it all out. Maybe I'll get it in a week, a month, a year, or in the next lifetime. But let me tell you how it works. God put me on this world. He's building me. He's growing me. And when he throws a challenge my way, I don't say I'll get the next one. I stare at the challenge and go, this one is also good. Had the Jews walked into Israel, then stared at those walls and said, this is good, they would have figured out on their own that there's a good thing here. You know what's good here? The people behind are weak people. That's what Moshe was getting at. Amazing. Had they would have walked into those towns and seen people dying and instinctively said, this is good too, they would have been like, good. How is it good? How is it good? How is it good? They're like, oh my gosh, we're spies. Had the Jews walked in and said, I don't have to figure everything out. I don't got to know everything. I don't run this world. If God is sending it my way, it's for my benefit. I'm looking at it and with faith, staring at the thing and saying, this also is good. And if I keep on doing that, you know what I'm going to get for it? I'm going to unlock the goodness that is within the thing that's in front of us. Because many times in life, when God wants to give us good, he packages it in sour. We don't earn it yet. We don't deserve it yet. So to give it to us, he surrounds it in something that's a little challenging, and he waits to see, are we going to go back and go, I knew God hated me? Or we can go forward and go, this has got to be good. This has got to be good. And if you go forward and say, this has got to be good, you know what ends up happening? You unlock it. This challenging kid, the kid that's so hard to raise, this is good that I have him. Of course, it's easier. Sometimes things are so hard to understand and things are so wonderful. Okay, let's move crisis out. Let's move moments of crisis and moments of euphoria because then we get lost. Let's talk about the rest of it in the middle. I'm sitting in traffic. I'm having a hard day. This is good. I don't know why. It's good. Gam zu latova. Every day when you stare at a challenge and thank God for your challenges, you're unlocking them. You're achieving geula. You're looking at a world and searching for the greatness in each and everything, bringing out that thing. That's what it's about. And here's a trick for it, and then I'll end. I know I'm going a little over. Watch this. Listen to this verse. It's so awesome. Torah is so great. It's like little clues. It's like looking at clues all day. It's like you have to be Sherlock Holmes. Moses is instructing them. And he says to them, go look at the fruit, the Jews. Like, go check out the food situation. You know what I'm saying? Like, go look at the shmorg. He says, go lokach them and bring back mi pri haaretz and bring back from fruits of the land. And then the Torah says, v'hayamin yemei bikurei anavim. The days that they went in were during the time called bikurei anavim, which are the first fruits of the grapes. Who cares when it was? There's grapes in the trees. Why does it matter to me what the season was? Because it's a clue. You know what bikurim mean? Bikurim would be the gifts that we gave God. It was the sacrifice or the gifts we brought to the temple to say thank you. It's the part of our service that symbolizes gratitude. As the Medrash says, Bereshit bara Elokim. Bereshit, that word means bishvil bikurim shenikra reshit. Because God says, you know why I created the world? For your gratitude. So Moses stuck them a little trick. He says, look out. You know what time it is? It's the time of bikurei and avim. Bikurei, bikurim. It's the time of gratitude. Here's the secret. You place gratitude on your lenses, now you'll be fine. The difference between greatness and smallness, between redemption and destruction, between growth and failure, is not based on what the world around us is. It's based on how we see the world around us. And the essence of our history is that God tells us every moment, you don't even know what's inside you. You don't even know what's inside you, God says. I'm inside you. You're a piece of me. Chelek Elokam Mimal. What I need you to do is not worry about your strength. You got plenty of strength. You ever need a lesson in strength? Go look over there. Yeah, Middle East. Look what one nation can do in just a couple of years. You want to see strength? I'll show you strength. Let me tell you something. You got all the strength you need. I give you that, but I'll tell you what I can't give you, God says. I can't give you perspective. That's up to you. You determine. If I throw you a challenge, you saying because God hates me, God doesn't know me, God doesn't love me, or when I throw you a challenge, you look and you go, whoa, he's growing me. Thank you for that. Thank you for my challenges. Thank you, Hashem. Because if that's your mentality, you're going to unlock Geula in your families, in your communities, and maybe, just maybe, in the entire world. The fix during this period of time is to double up our gratitude. And my blessing to this incredible, wonderful, awesome community, which I fell in love with from the moment I touched down, that we should be zoche to do this again, but the Indarba should be moved to Yerushalayim, Waldorf, Astoria, overlooking the temple. We'll get a great Israeli breakfast in the morning. We'll get the afternoon by the Korbanos, we'll have a barbecue, and we'll hang out where we're supposed to. And we'll know that I got here because I learned the lessons of the spies. May we be that generation. May you be that community. May we be zoche this year to not have to fast, to sit on the floor. May we be zoche to stand tall, stand proud, climb on airplanes, and see the rebuilding of the temple. May it come soon in our days. Thank you for having me. B'mehera b'yameinu amen. It's all